Welcome back again. I'm Daryl Dunnington with DSD Inc. We're in our evening session, 6 p.m., October the 16th. Let's take a look at what we did earlier today, our previous session. Do a quick review. And about signing, routing, all of those elements with Pega. And so now let's take a look. And of course, from that session, we have the WebEx that you should have received. You have a channel you can go to, and you have the meeting notes. I strongly encourage you, though you sat through the hour lecture that we had earlier, go back and listen to the 15-minute summary. 15-minute summary is really good. Again, it's in Spanish. It's in depth. They don't miss any topic. They talk about everything. So make sure that you use that to go and review. So for today's session, we want to take a look at how do we control the workflow? How do we control the case workflow? We'll look at how to set features that can skip a stage or a step. We'll take a look at the automation shapes, all the shapes that you have that represent certain activities and functionality for you to carry out. So that's core of what we're doing. You should start being very familiar with Pega, how to create a case type, how to look at a stage, a step, a process, how those come into play. We're going to take a deeper look at the process. We're going to look at that process, examine that stage and step, see some conditional functionality that we can issue in that perspective. So that's what we'll do for today. So I hope you have your system up and running. As I mentioned before, if you follow along with me, I think it's a better experience for you. It's a greater learning experience. Try to do what I do. I always like to bring up the blueprint application built out for me. Very easy for me to show you different aspects of Pega and what they look like in a very robust application, and how to even add some components to it. And I did that earlier. We went in and we added some fields in one of the other sessions, and we looked at views and we looked at field groups. So it's a good learning experience if you can get your system up and running. All right, so back at the App Studio, I go back to the Case Type Explorer. If you have forgotten, remember all of these items on the left-hand side, these are called explorers. And remember, this is our portal that I'm in. So I'm going to restate some of the obvious terms now that you should know. So we're in the App Explorer. This is our portal for the business architect. Left-hand side, we have overview. Overview allows me to see a general overview of information about this particular application, not just the case type, but about the application. The case types will show you all of our business outcomes. We call those business outcomes in Pega. We have a case life cycle that will flow from beginning to end, that may have a happy path, and it can have an alternate path to capture errors or alternate steps or stages that may not apply to the happy path. We have our Data Explorer. We looked at our Data Explorer in one of our earlier sessions. It showed us all of the data objects, gives us a global view of all the objects that are out there. Any data pages, that's the rule that gives us the capability to access information from a data point, like a database. It gives me all of the case types that may reference that particular data object. Remember, we said data objects are created so that they can be reusable. And you can see that many case types can reuse some of the same data. Channels, you should have read a little bit about channels. You should have done an exercise when you created your first case type in your case life cycle. A channel indicates where your application will be viewed or where it will run. So it can be a portal, it can be embedded into a website, it can be on a mobile device, it can be in part of a digital message, email. So those are some of the channels that we work with. Here we have the Explorer. We have not gotten to this Explorer yet for the Data Explorer, but the Data Explorer is where you have the capability to generate reports. Reports in Pega is like any other reports. It gives you a snapshot of the information that you are requesting at a particular given time. So we have a list of reports, we call them insights, that we then can run and get back information. We have a library of some of the assets here. It's taking a little longer for it to come up. But here's a library. You can go and look at the library, see if there's something similar to what you may want to do, and you can add that to your library. You can create it. You can do testing. I won't go through all of these because they're not really important at this time. User. So now you have the users where you can manage your users. Now this is important. In one of your exercises, they have you go and create personas and then add operators. So this is where you would go to in the app studio, go to users, go to manage user, you see personas and you see people. And you have AI designer, and you have AI designers for some of the agents, some of the AI agents. They run some of the background tasks, and there are ways to connect to other interfaces. And then we have the settings. Okay, so just in case you guys didn't know that, I want to make sure that we reviewed that. So let's get back to our case and our case types, and let's go into estate planning. All right, so as we go into estate planning, let me go back to here. Yeah, here we go. Let me go back to Pega Academy. And in Pega Academy, this was part of your reading. So I want to walk through some of this to reinforce what you should have learned. They're talking about processes and process flow. So we know that when we create case lifecycle, we have a stage, we have a process, and we have steps attached to the process. And that's a part of the case lifecycle. Here's a good picture that they're showing you. And they're indicating that when I go to a process and I see 4 steps, that indicates that when I go to a different view, when I go to the flow view, the steps become shapes. The steps become shapes. Steps become shapes. The step becomes a shape. The step becomes a shape. And so that's considered a flow rule. So we talk about the process step, and we call it the process flow because a different view of the process is to see the flow rules. And the way we get to that and configure it, I either can configure by adding more steps, or I can go into the flow rule and I can add shapes that indicate the step. So let's take a look at that. Let's go back to our environment, and let me ask you guys a question just to keep you awake. Okay, how many shapes will I see when I open the flow rule initial consultant. How many shapes will I see? 1, 3, or 5? You guys can answer it in the chat. Give me some feedback. 1, 3, or 5. How many shapes will I see? 1, 3, or 5? Answer in the chat. I don't see any answers. Someone? How many flow rules, how many flow shapes will I see when I go into the process here? 1, 3, or 5? Put your answer in the chat. Someone like to guess? Okay, very good, very good. So 3, 3, 3. All right, absolutely, absolutely. So let's go ahead and do it. If you have your system up, then go and click on configure process. You see that? I can do it on any one of these. So let's go into here and let's click on the process, and it brings it up in read-only mode. So it brings it up and it tells me that I can go back to the staging steps if I like. Okay, come on, come on, come on, come on. Taking it a while to process, but it should come up. Now I may have to refresh my page. It's not moving. Let's go back. Of course, my system goes down when I do a live test. So let me refresh everything. Give me just a second. Let me do a refresh. Get a good new set of memory. And now let's go to the state planning again, case type. Now when I go to initial consultant and I click on it, should open up a window, and there we go. It shows me the shapes. And you are absolutely right. See, Fatima, Carol, Joshua, Israel, 1, 2, 3. Now I could count those, but that's not the real answer to the question. You really have 3 shapes. These are shapes. This is a start shape. It can only be one start shape in a flow. This is considered a flow. This is considered a flow. It is part of the flow rule. I have 1 shape, 2 shapes, 3 shapes. I have a start shape. I have a end shape. I can have multiple end shapes. I can have multiple end shapes. I can only have 1 start shape. And of course, I can move these around. And the arrows indicate the direction in which the application is flowing. Right. So we're going to gather information first. After we gather information, we will define our goals, and then we will analyze our status. Now, all of these shapes, they have nodes at their endpoints. That means that I can drag a connector out and I can connect it to something, to the other node. To the other node. You see that? I have the capability to do that. I need to do an action and do a refresh, but that's part of the capability. I can get into that flow. I can make it happen. Now, if I want to see some of the other shapes that I can attach or that I can utilize, I have the decision shape, which you see. I have something called a sub-process. So that's a flow within a flow. Think of, if you understand programming, I have a method or function, whatever you want to call it, but within that method or function, I'm calling another method or function. So this will allow me to call another another flow rule. So we call it a sub process. If this is a flow process, I can call another process. You have the start and end. And then we have all of the animation. So I can use any of these. I can attach any of these. So I can attach content as generic content, maybe a file I'm trying to upload, PDF. It allows you to configure it. I can change the different stages if I like. So I can utilize that to determine if I want to stay in the happy path or if I want to jump to an alternate stage. I have these two new automations where I can connect to interfaces for Gen AI. I can run agents in the background that uses generative AI to execute. I can create an additional case. That may be I'm running a case and I need to create a temporary case to store some information in and then eventually delete it at the end of the process. Create a PDF, generate some type of document. I can persist the case. And what does that mean? Persist the case means I may need to store it or save it off someplace, and then I need to bring it back. I may need to marshal it and I need to bring it back. I can post to the pulse. Remember, that's the messaging system where we're sending everything out, that if I'm on a team, we can have a conversation. Push notifications out. So it might be part of my process. I need to notify some people when some action has occurred, so I can push notifications. I can run data transforms, allow me to update information, modify information. I can send an email, so I can quickly put in someone's email. Of course, Pega's attached and configured for an email server, so I can send an email out to someone. I can send a notification, much like I can push a notification. I can update a case. And then the ones that are in blue, these are all automations also, but these are approvals, so these are considered sub-processes. So it's a process within a process. I have a duplicate case. Next week, you'll learn about how do I evaluate a case to see if it's duplicate or not. Let's see, I have questionnaire. So at the end of my case, I may want whoever's taking it, the operator, to take some type of questionnaire. I have conversation flow, different annotations that I can add. So you see that I have all of those shapes that will give me the capability to indicate what actions I want to do when I want to execute and go forward. Now, this particular decision shape, it's based upon what we call a when rule, W-H-E-N, a when rule. So it says it's a custom condition, and I have to go into the when rule and I have to configure it. I may do something like select this field when the asset value is, I don't know, let's see, greater than, I don't know, 1 million. Now, when that's true, then it would take my true path. So my true path may end up going, if I can select it again. So now my true path may end up going here and bypassing the analyze financial status. That's very easy to do. The decision shape will allow you to choose many different rules. There's about 12 rules that it can choose that you can select from. From a BA perspective, we typically want to use the when rule. The when rule is a Boolean test. It's either true or it's false. And so we want to follow that line of thinking. This UI, if you remember, it may be one shape, but it's composed of many of our rules. If you remember Constellation, that's a component. That may be a portal wrapped around a section, and many other rules that make this UI what it is. So let's go ahead and go back. I didn't save anything, so nothing is going to change here. All right, so let's go in and let's take a look at another process. Now this process is different. Now it has 4 shapes, right? And it's a UI, a UI, a UI. It's a automated action. That means there's some logic that's going to run. That's what you see here. So it's not pausing for input. Once it goes through these 3 UIs, then it's going to process some data. And once it's finished, it's going to hit the end shape, and it's going to go to the next one, to the client review. So we get to the client review, and we get to its process. Take a look at its process. And it's going to have a UI. Then after the UI, now watch this. This is called a what? A sub-process. The process is blue. That means it's calling another process. What if I want to see the other process that's being called? Locate the plus, and you click on it, and it opens up for you. You may have to double click. You double click, and it opens up. And you see that the approval process in Pega is very, very complicated. But we have object-oriented capabilities, data hiding. You don't have to worry about all the details behind it. All you have to do is supply it with its configuration parameters. So if I'm doing a single level approval, you'll see it has the simple approval, and it calls another step. You see the single approval, and it calls another flow rule. Wow. So notice something. For my client flow, I've called the sub-process PX approval, which called another sub-process PX single approval, which called a flow rule, the final flow rule or flow process rule, PY cascading get approval. And it has a decision, UI, a decision, and it has the end shapes. Remember I said you can have multiple end shapes. Now, notice the little L's that are on the UI. That indicates that they will have a SLA, a service level agreement on them in order to get that done at a certain time. Okay, so let's come back up to this flow, and it takes us right back here, and you see there's some decisioning. We go back to this. If it's not a simple approval, remember the approvals that I spoke about are based upon your internal hierarchy and how it's set up. Well, in this case, if it's a cascading approval, I may need to go from my manager to my senior manager, from my senior manager to my director, from my director to my senior director. Then it would follow this path. It would be a cascading approval, and it would make its decision and carry out its actions. So now, after it goes through the approval process, then it calls an automated process. Again, nothing is paused, nothing is stopped. Logic is executed, and some notification is sent out to a group of people. That's what we say, notify relevant parties. Parties in this case would be a group of people that I'm notifying. All right, so let's go back to our case lifecycle. And once it finishes notifying relevant parties, guess what? It goes to the next flow. So now I'm at this flow, and it executes all of the steps associated with this process. So let's open up this process. In this process, I have two user interfaces that will have to be manually entered in. Some human has to touch those. After that, then it will go into two automated processes to where it will analyze that information, inform the beneficiaries, and see if it complies with some of the HIPAA regulations. Now I'm finished with that process. It finishes. Now it goes to the next stage process. And now we're at the maintenance and update process, and it has 4 steps of execution. First step is a UI screen. Second step is a decision, and it's a when rule. There it is. It's a when rule. Third step is a UI, and then the last step is some logic that is processing the data, generate regulatory reports. So it's calling the reports and it's generating that particular artifact. Now, at that point, the case is complete. But you see how processes have attached to it steps, how it can open up the steps and get into the process view, and I can see the shapes that represent the steps. Now, it's bidirectional, so if I add something to the process in the shape as a shape, it will show up also as a step. Now, the other part of the process is that we can do conditional processing. Conditional processing in Pega happens at the stage or the process level. Now, notice something. If I click on the second stage, can't do it on the first stage because the first stage, it always has to run. So it's kind of a special stage. But after the first stage, then I get to the second stage, and you see over to the right, it gives me the opportunity to have some conditions. Now, by default, the stage is always set to never skip. If I create a stage, the expectation is that you want me to execute the stage and its associated processes that are with it. Okay. But if I want to say, I only want you to execute this particular stage when some condition occurs. And again, guess what type of rule that I'm using? I'm using the when rule to set the condition. Or I can come back and say, is there an existing condition to where if it is always true, or I have these other when rules? Many times people create predefined when rules out of the box when rule with the prefix is email, is mashup, is mobile, is not mobile. So the evaluation, these are when rules, and I can say use an existing condition, and if it is email is true, then and only then do I want to execute this particular stage. So you do have a feature built in Pega that will allow you to skip a stage, but by default, it is set to never. Now the process, watch this, gives you the same capability, but it uses a different terminology. Stage says never skip it. Process says always run it. Again, the stage says never skip it, so I'd have to go in and modify that. Here, the process says always run it. Then the same thing, stage uses negative logic. Here we're using positive logic. Says, well, always run a process. But what if I don't want to run a process? Then again, I have these custom conditions that I can do. And over to the right in the gadget, I can configure, again, another when rule. Another when rule. Or I can say existing condition, and you have the same capabilities here. Gives you one of these that are already in existence that you then can choose these. Okay, so I'll set this back to always. And you see then I can skip, I have the options and the features to skip a stage or a step based upon some conditional processing if I like. By default, when you create a stage, the stage says never skip me, I'll always run. The process says always run me. The assumption is you'll always run it. Okay. All right, now, optional actions. Now, this is a different term that we use in Pega. Most technologies for software will use it as just a pop-up window. Everyone's familiar with a pop-up window. An optional action is definitely outside the happy path. It's not a alternate path because it's not part of the case lifecycle. It is a optional action. And in my optional action, now notice over to the right, I have case lifecycle and I have optional action. When I'm in case lifecycle, it shows me and gives me the capability to create processes, stages, and steps, and to do my design. Now, what if I want a particular type of pop-up window, but I only want it to occur when I'm in the document preparation phase? I only want it to occur here. In my optional actions, I would come and say, under document preparations, I would click on actions, and I would create me a UI. And that UI, when I run it, it will specify, or it will always pop up, but only for that particular stage. And of course, I go in and I can configure it. I can give it any information that I want to give it, but just know that it is a pop-up. So you may want to use that in the case to where you get to a certain place in your flow, and you know that this stage has the processing to where they need access to all of the student records. And just a short index of the student records because they need to select something out of it. Well, that would be a great place where you would go create this so that it can easily be popped up when I'm in any one of those UIs in that particular stage. I would then put it there. Right. So that would mean if I added an optional action there, that would indicate that these three UIs will see it and will be able to utilize it. And we'll see that in some of our actions later on when we talk more in depth about UI. But this is giving you a general understanding about how I can have additional or conditional processing that happens outside the happy path, and that's outside of the alternate stage also. Now, what if I wanted to show up everywhere, regardless to what stage that I'm in? I wanted to show up anytime I have a UI. In all of these stages, I want it to be one of the features I get access to. Well, in Pega, you actually do. Over here, you see, these are called case-wide actions. And those case-wide actions, edit details, change stage, reopen, they appear across all of the stages. And if you wanted to do that, all you'd have to do is add your own action there. And it might be that you work in student enrollment and you need that information all the time. So now you don't want to just have it in document preparation stage. You always want that pop up to be available so you can click and quickly see the information that you need to process. All right, so I think I covered all of the topics that you guys should have gone over. We went over the automations, the decision, conditional, skipping stage step, and the optional action. So at this point, I will pause. Does anyone have any questions or any comments at this point? Make sure that I discarded all my changes, and I'm just going to run it one time just so that you can see the flow. So here, I have to create. I want to do the estate planning. And you see, here's my UI. I'll tell it to fill in. Remember from this morning, I created some of the fields down below, or maybe it was the other day. And you see that it takes me to the next screen. Tell it to fill in the information. I can select. I can advance my case. So now it's showing you that as I'm going through this process, I'm going through I went through the initial stage, now I'm in the document preparation. And from the document preparation, it would go all the way to the client review. From the client review to the execution of the storage, from storage to the maintenance and updates. Remember those three actions that I showed you, those optional actions? They appear here on the little menu to the left. These three will appear. Now, in document preparation, had I created one, and now I'm in document preparation, you would see a fourth one here. But it would only exist for the UIs as long as I stayed in document preparation. So those are called stage-wise optional actions versus these are case-wide optional actions. Now, you can also add processes. An optional action is generally or typically seen as one UI pops up and then it disappears. It takes you back to your flow. Doesn't matter if it's stage-wide or case-wide. But if I add a process, remember the process flow? If I add a process flow, that means that I want several actions to be carried out. And it may or may not return back to your case where it left off. It may send you off to some other place. But that's more of an advanced topic at this point. Just remember what we're talking about now. One UI pops up, gives you information, and then it sends you right back to your flow. All right, so that's all I wanted to cover with you this evening. Let's go back and look at what we have for our next session. So next week, Monday, you guys only have one essay that you will be required to do. So give yourself a hand of applause. Know that you need to finish up all of your essays, get caught up. You have the weekend to do it. Make sure that you get caught up. But when we come back on Monday, we'll talk about duplicate cases. You'll start working on duplicate cases, child cases, how to manage those, how to validate data. So now it's important once I submit the data. I need to validate to make sure it's the way it should be. How do I manipulate data? So now we're getting into how do we update it? Not just how to design and configure, but now we have some real data and we want to be able to manipulate that and to create personas and channels. So now the way we may want a portal or channel to look for one group of people, one persona may be different. Like we have the BA, business architect, and we have App Studio versus Dev Studio for the system architect. I'll pause now. Any questions or comments? All right, so if not, continue on. I'll see you Monday at 10 a.m. your time, 12 my time in New York. And again, don't forget the goal. Don't forget the goal. I say don't be weary in well-doing. Work hard. It takes a lot of effort for you to learn this. We have the material there for you. I need you to do the work so that you can get the 2 certifications, 5 badges, and 4 certificates. Make sure that you're doing the challenges in Pega Academy and that you're doing the quizzes, because when you finish all of them, you will have to take a test. And that test will not be enabled unless you have completed all of the challenges and you've answered all of the quizzes. That's all I have for you. Have a great evening. Enjoy your weekend, and I'll see you Monday.